Keep the house, Damien. Just don't spend the rest of your life wondering what you really threw away. Claire Kensington's voice was calm enough to make the silence inside the attorney's office feel unbearably loud. Damien Carter barely looked up from the divorce papers as his pen scratched across the final signature. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered beneath the afternoon sun, every glass tower reflecting the kind of success people dreamed about. Inside that polished conference room, however, nothing resembled a fairy tale anymore. Claire rested one hand gently over the small curve of her pregnancy while watching the man she had loved for 7 years erase their marriage in less than 30 seconds. Strangely, she did not cry. That was the first mystery. The second arrived only moments later. Her phone vibrated once against the leather chair. She glanced at the screen, then quietly turned it face down before anyone else noticed. Damien assumed it was another friend checking on the heartbroken wife he was leaving behind. It wasn't. The message contained only 6 words. "The board is waiting, Your Majesty." Claire slipped the phone into her purse without changing her expression. Across the table, Damien leaned back with the confidence of a man convinced he had just removed the only obstacle standing between himself and a brighter future. Vanessa Langford, the elegant woman waiting downstairs in a chauffeured town car, represented everything he believed success should look like. Young, glamorous, ambitious, endlessly photographed beside luxury brands and exclusive charity galas. Claire, by comparison, seemed painfully ordinary. She preferred simple dresses, homemade dinners, quiet weekends, and conversations that never revolved around stock prices or magazine covers. Somewhere along the way, Damien had mistaken peace for weakness. He believed he had outgrown the woman who stood beside him when his company occupied a rented office barely larger than a storage unit. "You'll be taken care of," he said without emotion, sliding a folder toward her. "The house in Connecticut, monthly support, whatever medical care you need until the baby arrives. I'm making sure you're comfortable." Claire looked at the folder but never opened it. Comfort. It was such an interesting word. Comfortable people did not secretly disappear twice a month on international flights no one knew about. Comfortable people did not receive encrypted calls at impossible hours from numbers that never appeared twice. Comfortable people certainly did not have strangers in tailored suits quietly greeting them with respectful nods in airport lounges around the world. Yet Damien had never asked why those things happened. Perhaps he had stopped paying attention long before today. The attorney cleared his throat, collecting the signed documents with practiced professionalism. "Mrs. Kensington, once these are filed, everything becomes official." Claire smiled politely. "I understand." There was no hesitation, no pleading, no desperate attempt to change Damien's mind. That unsettled him more than tears would have. For a fleeting second, he searched her face, almost expecting some hidden emotion to surface. Instead, he found only quiet acceptance, as though she already knew the ending to a story everyone else had just begun reading. Down the hallway, the elevator chimed softly. Another vibration came from Claire's phone. She ignored it again. Somewhere far beyond New York, in boardrooms spread across continents, executives waited for a single decision that could shift markets before sunrise. None of them realized the woman they were waiting for had just signed divorce papers with a millionaire who believed he had finally won everything. Neither did Damien. He watched Claire stand, smoothed the sleeve of her simple cream-colored coat, and walked toward the door with measured grace. She paused only once, her hand resting lightly against the polished brass handle. Without turning around, she spoke almost to herself. "Some people spend their whole lives chasing a crown," she whispered. "Others spend their whole lives hiding one." Then she walked away, leaving Damien convinced he had divorced an ordinary pregnant wife, completely unaware that the quiet woman disappearing into the hallway carried a secret worth far more than every dollar his empire had ever earned. Claire stepped into the private elevator without looking back. The polished doors closed with a whisper, sealing away 7 years of memories inside a building that suddenly felt like it belonged to strangers. She inhaled slowly, resting one hand over her unborn child as the elevator descended toward the lobby. Her phone vibrated for the 3rd time. This time she answered. "Good afternoon, Ms. Kensington," a composed British voice said. "The board has postponed the emergency vote for exactly 27 minutes. Every director is waiting for your final authorization." Claire closed her eyes for a brief moment. Thank you, Eleanor. I will be there shortly. The Singapore office has already joined. Zurich is online. Dubai has requested confirmation. They all assumed you were still attending your personal appointment. Claire smiled faintly. I was. The line ended. When the elevator doors opened, a wave of afternoon conversations filled the marble lobby. Lawyers hurried toward meetings. Executives checked expensive watches. Tourists admired the towering glass architecture. Nobody recognized the woman quietly walking across the polished floor carrying a leather handbag that looked years old. Nobody noticed the convoy waiting across the street either. 3 identical black vehicles stood perfectly aligned. Men and women in tailored navy suits stepped forward the instant Claire approached the curb. Not one of them spoke loudly. One simply opened the rear door. Another handed her a secure tablet already displaying financial reports from 6 continents. A third nodded respectfully before saying, "Welcome back, Madam Chair." Claire entered the vehicle without hesitation. The city skyline drifted past tinted windows while the tablet filled with numbers that would have made headlines around the world. Market forecasts, energy acquisitions, artificial intelligence partnerships, humanitarian funding requests. Billion-dollar negotiations appeared one after another as naturally as grocery lists. Yet Claire studied each page with remarkable patience. She asked thoughtful questions. She approved scholarships before approving mergers. She postponed one acquisition because hundreds of employees would lose jobs. She increased disaster relief funding without discussing publicity. The advisors exchanged subtle glances. This was why none of them had ever questioned her leadership. Wealth had never impressed Claire. Responsibility had. Nearly 40 minutes later, the convoy entered a private underground entrance beneath an elegant midtown skyscraper with no company logo outside. Security recognized her immediately. Every checkpoint opened before she reached it. No identification was requested. No introductions were necessary. Inside the executive floor, dozens of senior leaders quietly rose from their seats the moment she entered the conference room. There was no applause, only respect earned over many years. Eleanor approached first. Congratulations on completing today's personal matter. Claire removed her coat and placed it carefully over the chair. Thank you. Let us begin. Massive digital screens illuminated the room, displaying a global map covered with investments stretching from renewable energy to medical research. One director spoke carefully. Before we proceed, there is one concern. Carter Technologies has submitted another proposal seeking strategic financing. Their valuation continues to decline after several quarters of unstable performance. Claire remained silent for several seconds. Damien's company name hung in the air like a forgotten photograph. Nobody inside the room knew the connection except Eleanor, whose discretion had become legendary. Finally, Claire answered with complete professionalism. Evaluate the proposal using the same standards applied to every applicant. No exceptions. No special treatment. Several executives nodded while taking notes. Business continued. No one noticed the almost invisible sadness passing through Claire's eyes. She had once stayed awake countless nights helping Damien refine business plans around a tiny kitchen table while eating inexpensive takeout because every dollar mattered. He believed those breakthroughs came from his own instincts. She had never corrected him. She preferred watching someone she loved succeed over receiving recognition herself. Today, for the first time, she realized silence could become the most expensive gift one person ever gave another. As the meeting continued, Eleanor quietly placed a single envelope beside Claire's notebook. There was no sender's name, only a handwritten sentence across the front. It read, "The truth cannot stay hidden forever." Claire stared at the unfamiliar handwriting for several thoughtful seconds, unaware that the carefully guarded secret surrounding her extraordinary life was already beginning to find its way into someone else's hands. The envelope remained untouched throughout the meeting. Every executive around the table focused on quarterly forecasts, international expansion, and long-term investment strategies, but Claire could not ignore the simple sentence written across the cream-colored paper. Someone knew enough to send it. The only question was how much they actually understood. When the final presentation ended, the directors quietly gathered their files while Eleanor remained seated. She waited until the conference room emptied before speaking. "Would you like our security division to examine the envelope?" Claire looked at it for another moment before gently shaking her head. Not yet. Sometimes people reveal more when they believe nobody is paying attention. Eleanor nodded. She had worked beside Claire for nearly 12 years and had learned that patience often uncovered more truth than confrontation ever could. Across the city, Damien Carter experienced a very different afternoon. The divorce papers had barely been filed before photographers surrounded the entrance of an exclusive rooftop restaurant overlooking Central Park. Vanessa Langford smiled naturally beneath the flashing cameras as Damien wrapped an arm around her shoulders. News outlets quickly labeled them New York's newest power couple. Champagne glasses reflected the sunset. Luxury brands competed for attention. Every image projected confidence, success, and limitless possibility. Damien believed the difficult chapter of his life had officially ended. "Do you feel relieved?" one reporter asked. Damien answered without hesitation. "Sometimes moving forward means making difficult choices. I wish everyone the best." Vanessa squeezed his hand as though confirming the perfect public performance. Within minutes, their photographs spread across financial blogs and entertainment magazines alike. The headlines celebrated romance. None of them mentioned Claire. That omission pleased Vanessa more than any compliment. Later that evening, she scrolled through thousands of online comments while relaxing inside Damien's penthouse. "She disappeared faster than I expected," Vanessa laughed. People already forgot she existed. Damien poured 2 glasses of sparkling water before looking toward the skyline. "She never liked attention anyway." Vanessa studied him carefully. "Do you miss her?" The question lingered longer than either of them expected. Damien answered with a small smile that sounded more convincing than sincere. "I miss who I thought she was." Upstairs, hidden behind walls of imported marble and priceless artwork, everything appeared flawless. Yet downstairs in Carter Technologies headquarters, a different mood quietly unfolded. The chief financial officer stared at a fresh report that had arrived less than 20 minutes earlier. One institutional investor had unexpectedly withdrawn from a pending partnership. Then another requested additional review before signing a financing agreement. Neither decision seemed catastrophic by itself. Together, they created an uncomfortable pattern. "Probably coincidence," someone muttered during the emergency conference call. Nobody argued. Meanwhile, inside her private residence overlooking the Hudson River, Claire finally opened the mysterious envelope. There was no letter inside, only a single black and white photograph. She studied it silently. The image had clearly been taken years ago inside a modest neighborhood diner. Damien sat across from her wearing an inexpensive jacket while laughing over coffee served in chipped ceramic mugs. Neither of them looked wealthy. Neither of them cared. In the background, almost hidden behind a newspaper, sat an elderly man watching them with remarkable attention. Claire slowly turned the photograph over. On the back, another handwritten sentence appeared. He knew before Damien ever did. Claire searched her memory. The diner. The rainy afternoon. The old gentleman near the window. She remembered seeing him once, perhaps twice, but never speaking with him. Why would someone preserve such an ordinary moment for so many years? Eleanor's secure phone number appeared on the screen before Claire could continue thinking. "Madam Chair," Eleanor said calmly, "there is something you should know. An investigative journalist has begun asking unusual questions about your past. So far, they have been extremely discreet." Claire glanced again at the photograph resting in her hand. "Do they know my identity?" "Not completely," Eleanor answered. "But someone appears determined to connect your private life with your corporate history." Claire placed the photograph back inside the envelope with extraordinary care. Outside her window, the lights of Manhattan shimmered across the river like scattered stars. Somewhere within that endless city, a forgotten witness, an ambitious reporter, and an anonymous messenger had each begun moving toward the same hidden truth. None of them realized that once the first secret surfaced, every carefully constructed illusion surrounding Claire and Damien would begin unraveling faster than anyone could stop it. The following Monday began with something Damien Carter had never experienced before. Silence. Not the peaceful silence of an empty office before sunrise, but the uneasy silence that follows unanswered calls and delayed replies. He stood inside the executive conference room overlooking Midtown while the city awakened below him, yet every familiar routine seemed slightly out of rhythm. His assistant entered carrying a tablet instead of the usual morning reports. 3 investors have requested additional time before tomorrow's signing ceremony, she said carefully. Damien frowned. Did they give a reason? They simply said they are reassessing long-term priorities. Damien leaned back in his chair. Investors change their minds every day. That was business. Nothing unusual. Reschedule them. Already done. She hesitated before continuing. There is something else. Horizon Capital canceled lunch. Damien finally looked up. Horizon Capital had pursued a partnership with Carter Technologies for nearly 6 months. They had never canceled anything before. Did they explain why? No, sir. She quietly left the room. By noon, another message arrived. A supplier requested revised payment guarantees. An international banking partner postponed a conference call. A venture fund suddenly requested additional compliance documents that had already been approved weeks earlier. None of the developments seemed serious on their own. Together, they formed a pattern nobody inside the company could explain. During the afternoon executive meeting, the chief financial officer projected several charts across the large display. Revenue remains stable, he began. Cash flow is healthy. There are no operational concerns. However, confidence appears to be shifting. Damien crossed his arms. Confidence based on what? The room fell quiet. No one had an answer. Across town, Claire spent the same afternoon inside a bright conference room surrounded not by financial advisors, but by architects, pediatric specialists, and charitable foundation directors. Instead of discussing profit margins, they reviewed plans for a children's medical research center that would serve families regardless of income. Claire listened more than she spoke. Every proposal returned to one question. Will this improve lives 10 years from now? The room never discussed publicity. Nobody mentioned naming rights. They simply planned. Eleanor quietly entered halfway through the meeting carrying another confidential folder. I apologize for interrupting, she said. This cannot wait. Claire excused herself and followed Eleanor into a private office overlooking the Hudson River. The journalist has identified one connection, Eleanor explained. Not your identity. The diner. Claire immediately looked toward the photograph resting inside her desk drawer. How? Security footage from neighboring businesses was archived by a historical preservation project several years ago. Someone has been requesting access. Claire remained thoughtful rather than alarmed. Did they find the old gentleman? Eleanor nodded slowly. He passed away 3 years ago. A brief silence settled between them. Family? Claire asked. One grandson. His name is Daniel Mercer. Investigative reporter. Claire almost smiled. Pieces that had seemed unrelated suddenly moved closer together. He inherited more than photographs. Eleanor understood immediately. You believe his grandfather left him something? I believe nobody spends years preserving ordinary memories without a reason. Meanwhile, Vanessa enjoyed every moment of her new public life. Invitations arrived daily. Magazine interviews praised her elegance beside one of New York's most successful entrepreneurs. Yet beneath the glamorous photographs, she noticed something Damien refused to acknowledge. He had become distracted. During dinners, he checked financial updates every few minutes. During conversations, his attention drifted toward unanswered emails. At one charity event, Vanessa finally asked the question she had been holding back. Are you thinking about your company or your ex-wife? Damien laughed softly. Those are 2 completely different things. Vanessa studied him. Are they? The question lingered long after the music ended. Late that evening, Damien returned alone to his office. The building was almost empty. He walked past framed magazine covers celebrating Carter Technologies before stopping beside an old photograph displayed near the reception area. It showed the company's first office. 4 folding chairs. 1 second-hand desk. 1 whiteboard covered with handwritten ideas. Claire stood quietly in the corner, smiling toward the camera, while Damien occupied the center, shaking hands with his first client. He stared at the picture longer than expected. For the first time in years, he wondered who had actually taken the photograph, and why he could not remember a single detail from the day everyone claimed had changed his life forever. Ironically, the first crack did not appear inside Carter Technologies. It appeared halfway around the world in Geneva, where a private investment summit welcomed some of the most influential financial leaders on the planet. Damien had spent months preparing for this event. A successful presentation there would restore confidence, attract fresh capital, and silence every rumor surrounding his company. He arrived wearing the confidence that had carried him through every boardroom for the past decade. Cameras followed him through the marble entrance while journalists shouted questions about artificial intelligence, clean energy, and international expansion. Damien answered each one with polished certainty. Everything looked exactly as it should, until he noticed something unusual. Several executives he personally knew greeted him politely, yet their attention repeatedly drifted toward the entrance behind him. They checked their watches. They whispered into earpieces. Even the summit organizers adjusted schedules without explanation. It felt as though everyone important was waiting for someone else. Damien quietly asked another chief executive, "Is there a special guest arriving?" The man smiled. "You have not heard?" The chair finally accepted the invitation after declining for 3 consecutive years. Which chair? The Kensington Global Consortium. Damien searched his memory. Every serious investor knew the name. The organization managed enormous holdings across technology, infrastructure, medical innovation, renewable energy, logistics, and humanitarian development. Despite controlling astonishing wealth, its leader almost never appeared in public. Rumors described the mysterious chairperson as exceptionally private. Some claimed it was an elderly billionaire. Others insisted the position rotated among family members. Nobody seemed to know the truth. Before Damien could ask another question, every conversation inside the grand ballroom gradually faded. The orchestra stopped playing. Security personnel positioned themselves discreetly along the main corridor. The massive entrance doors opened with elegant precision. 3 individuals entered first, followed by Eleanor, whose calm professionalism reflected years of disciplined leadership. She paused beside the doorway before stepping respectfully aside. Then Claire walked into the ballroom. She wore an ivory-tailored suit instead of an evening gown, her jewelry understated, her expression composed, her pregnancy visible but never defining her presence. There was no dramatic announcement. None was necessary. More than 800 guests instinctively stood. Conversations disappeared. Several international ministers crossed the room to greet her personally. Technology founders, Nobel Prize recipients, and investment legends patiently waited their turns simply to shake her hand. Damien remained frozen beside his table. His first thought was impossible. His second was even worse. He convinced himself there had to be another Claire Kensington. Yet every impossible detail aligned perfectly. Eleanor walked beside her. The same Eleanor whose name Claire had once mentioned only as an old colleague. The discreet security team. The quiet authority. The effortless respect filling every corner of the room. None of it resembled coincidence anymore. Across the ballroom, Claire noticed Damien almost immediately. For the briefest moment, their eyes met. She offered the same polite smile she might have given any familiar face at a professional conference. Nothing more. No anger. No satisfaction. No attempt to embarrass him. She simply continued greeting delegates from around the world. Somehow that calmness unsettled Damien far more than confrontation ever could. The summit moderator stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is our privilege to welcome the chair of Kensington Global Consortium, whose organizations have funded breakthroughs in medicine, education, sustainable infrastructure, and emerging technologies across more than 70 countries. Please welcome Ms. Claire Kensington." Applause rolled through the ballroom like distant thunder. Damien barely heard it. His mind replayed countless ordinary memories. Claire cooking dinner inside their small apartment while reviewing documents after midnight. Claire quietly canceling vacations because she claimed she had unexpected consulting work. Claire disappearing for one day every month without explanation before returning home, carrying nothing except a tired smile. He had accepted every explanation because he had never bothered asking another question. On stage, Claire began speaking with the same calm voice she had used inside the divorce attorney's office. She spoke about responsibility, long-term thinking, and measuring success by lives improved rather than fortunes accumulated. Every sentence felt effortless because none of it was performance. It was simply who she had always been. Damien suddenly realized the woman addressing the world's most powerful leaders was exactly the same woman he had believed possessed no ambition. And for the first time since signing the divorce papers, he understood that he had never truly known the person sitting across his own dinner table for 7 extraordinary years. Damien did not remember leaving the ballroom. He only remembered standing alone on a quiet terrace overlooking Lake Geneva while the applause inside continued without him. The cold evening breeze carried the distant sound of conversations that no longer included his name. For years he had believed influence was measured by headlines, market value, and luxury offices. Yet everything he had witnessed during the past hour obeyed a different kind of power. Claire had not entered the room demanding attention. The room had simply risen to greet her. He replayed every conversation they had shared during their marriage, searching desperately for clues he should have recognized. There had been the unexpected overseas trips she described as consulting work. The late-night conference calls she always accepted in another room. The confidential packages that occasionally arrived without company logos. He had ignored every detail because he assumed none of it could possibly matter. His phone interrupted the silence. The caller identification displayed the name of his chief financial officer. "Please tell me you have good news," Damien answered. The voice on the other end hesitated. "I wish I did. 2 additional strategic partners have postponed negotiations. They specifically requested time to evaluate changes in the international investment landscape after today's summit." Damien closed his eyes. "Did anyone mention Claire Kensington?" "No, sir. But everyone keeps discussing Kensington Global Consortium. Apparently, they announced a new innovation fund worth hundreds of billions of dollars." Damien looked back toward the illuminated conference center. "Anything else?" Another pause followed. "Our largest software client accepted a meeting tomorrow morning with another investment group. They have not canceled our contract yet." The call ended, leaving Damien surrounded by questions instead of answers. Inside the summit, Claire had already moved into a private roundtable with researchers, economists, and nonprofit leaders. The discussion centered on affordable medical technology for rural communities rather than luxury markets. She listened carefully to every presenter before asking thoughtful questions about long-term sustainability instead of quarterly returns. An elderly scientist smiled warmly after answering one of her questions. "Most investors ask how much profit this will generate. You asked how many families it will help." Claire returned the smile. "The numbers matter. People matter more." Several participants quietly nodded. It was a philosophy they had heard from her for years. During a short break, Eleanor approached carrying another confidential folder. "Daniel Mercer has arrived in Geneva," she whispered. Claire accepted the folder without opening it. "Has he contacted us?" "No. He has only requested archived attendance records from several charity events dating back almost 10 years. Claire considered that information carefully. "He is not chasing a scandal." Eleanor tilted her head slightly. "You believe he is chasing a story. I believe he is trying to understand why his grandfather kept watching 2 ordinary people inside a neighborhood diner." Across the convention center, Vanessa finally found Damien standing alone. "Everyone has been looking for you," she said gently. "You disappeared." Damien remained focused on the city lights beyond the balcony. "Did you know?" Vanessa frowned. "Know what?" "About Claire." She laughed quietly, convinced the question was absurd. "Your ex-wife?" Damien nodded almost absent-mindedly. "She is not who I thought she was." Vanessa folded her arms. "She is the woman you left behind. Nothing has changed." Damien looked directly at her for the first time that evening. "Everything changed. I just did not see it until today." Those words lingered between them longer than either expected. Later that night, Damien returned to his hotel suite, but found no interest in sleep. Instead, he opened an old storage folder connected to the earliest years of Carter Technologies. Thousands of digital files appeared across the screen. Business plans, investor presentations, product concepts, budget forecasts. One document immediately caught his attention: the original strategic roadmap that had convinced their first investor to provide funding. He clicked the file open. At the bottom of the final page appeared a line he had somehow forgotten existed. "Research and market modeling prepared by C. Kensington." Damien stared at the initials for several silent seconds before opening another file. Then another. Then another. The same initials appeared again and again, quietly woven through the foundation of everything he had proudly called his own. And with every document he opened, the impossible truth became harder to deny than the comfortable illusion he had believed for 7 long years. The hotel room remained dark except for the glow of Damien's laptop. Dawn slowly colored the horizon above Lake Geneva, yet he had not slept for a single minute. Every document he opened revealed another forgotten contribution from Claire. Market analysis, product forecasts, international regulations, expansion strategies. The foundation of Carter Technologies had never been built by one ambitious entrepreneur. It had been built by two people, and only one of them had ever accepted the spotlight. Damien leaned back in silence, remembering evenings when Claire sat beside him at their tiny apartment kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks and legal reports. She always claimed she simply enjoyed research. He remembered joking that she should have become a professor instead of wasting time helping him. She had smiled every single time. She never corrected him, never asked for recognition, never reminded him who had solved problems that once seemed impossible. His phone rang again. This time it was not his financial team. It was Daniel Mercer. Damien hesitated before answering. "Mr. Carter?" the journalist asked politely. "Yes. I would appreciate 20 minutes of your time. I believe we have a mutual interest in someone named Claire Kensington." Damien felt his pulse quicken. "How did you get this number?" Daniel laughed softly. "Journalists have their methods. May we meet?" 1 hour later, they sat inside a quiet lakeside cafe, far away from television cameras and conference halls. Daniel placed a weathered notebook on the table without opening it. "My grandfather spent nearly 15 years documenting remarkable people he believed history would misunderstand." Damien frowned. "What does that have to do with Claire?" Daniel carefully turned several pages before sliding the notebook across the table. There were handwritten observations dated almost a decade earlier. One sentence immediately captured Damien's attention. "The young woman always lets the man receive the applause, even when every important idea begins with her." Damien stared at the words. He knew them. He watched them, Daniel answered. "My grandfather owned the diner where you and Claire often spent Saturday mornings during your first years together." Damien remembered instantly. The elderly gentleman who always smiled while wiping coffee cups behind the counter. Why would he write about us? Daniel looked toward the lake before answering. "Because one afternoon he accidentally overheard a phone call Claire tried very hard to keep private." Damien remained silent. She was negotiating an international acquisition worth billions of dollars while eating pancakes that cost less than $15. Daniel smiled faintly. "When she finished the call, she returned to helping you revise your investor presentation as though nothing unusual had happened." Damien could hardly breathe. "She never told me." "No," Daniel replied. "My grandfather asked her once why she hid who she really was. She answered with something he never forgot." Daniel slowly read from the notebook. "If someone only loves me because of what I own, then they never loved me at all. I would rather lose money than lose the chance to know the truth about a person's heart." Neither man spoke for several moments. The quiet cafe suddenly felt much smaller than before. Across the city, Claire concluded another series of meetings before preparing to return to New York. Eleanor handed her the finalized itinerary. "Your aircraft departs in 90 minutes. Claire nodded before looking through the large terminal windows toward the distant mountains. "Has Daniel contacted Damien?" Eleanor asked carefully. Claire smiled gently. "He was always going to. Should we intervene?" "No." Claire rested one hand over her unborn child. "Some truths cannot be explained. They have to be discovered." Back at the cafe, Daniel reached into his briefcase one final time and removed a sealed envelope marked with Claire's name in elegant handwriting. "My grandfather instructed me to deliver this only after you finally understood who she truly was." Damien accepted the envelope with trembling hands. "What is inside?" Daniel stood from the table, leaving a few bills beside his untouched coffee. "I have never opened it." He paused before walking away. "But my grandfather wrote one last note for me. He believed that when you finally read Claire's letter, you would stop asking how she became one of the wealthiest women in the world and begin asking a much more painful question." Damien looked up. "Which question?" Daniel met his eyes with quiet sympathy. "Why the richest woman you ever knew spent 7 years pretending that your dreams mattered more than her own." Damien waited until he returned to his hotel before opening the envelope. The cream-colored paper inside carried Claire's familiar handwriting, steady and elegant. The same handwriting that had once filled birthday cards, grocery lists, and encouraging notes tucked inside his briefcase before difficult investor meetings. He unfolded the letter with unusual care. "If you are reading this, it means you finally looked backward instead of forward. I always wondered which direction would teach you more." Damien stopped reading for a moment. Every sentence felt as though it had been written years before this day ever arrived. You once asked me why I never cared about expensive watches or magazine covers. I told you happiness looked different to everyone. That answer was true, but incomplete. I had already lived a life where every luxury could be purchased. What I wanted was something money could never guarantee. I wanted to know whether someone could love Claire before discovering Kensington. Damien continued reading while memories quietly rearranged themselves inside his mind. Their first apartment, weekend grocery shopping, long walks through Central Park, evenings spent celebrating small victories with inexpensive pizza because they had promised each other that every dollar saved would move the company one step closer to success. Claire had never been pretending to be poor. She had simply been choosing an ordinary life because it made her happiest. The letter continued. Every investment I made in your company was approved because I believed in you, not because I expected ownership. Every suggestion I offered came from partnership, not ambition. I never wanted your gratitude. I only wanted your trust. Damien lowered the paper. That single word echoed louder than every financial report he had reviewed during the past week. Trust. Somewhere along the journey toward success, he had stopped protecting the one thing Claire valued above everything else. Later that afternoon, he requested a private meeting through Eleanor. He expected to be declined. Instead, a brief reply arrived less than an hour later. Tomorrow, 11 o'clock, 30 minutes. No media. The following morning, Damien entered a quiet botanical conservatory overlooking the lake. Sunlight filtered through towering glass ceilings while fountains filled the air with a gentle rhythm. Claire was already there, seated on a wooden bench surrounded by blooming white orchids. She looked peaceful, almost untouched by the emotional storm that had consumed him. Eleanor remained several yards away, giving them complete privacy. Damien approached slowly. "Thank you for seeing me." Claire smiled politely. "You asked." I agreed. For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, Damien held out the folded letter. I read every word. Claire nodded softly. "I hoped you would." He searched for the perfect apology, but discovered none existed. "I spent years believing I built everything alone." Claire looked toward the garden instead of answering immediately. Many people believe success belongs to the person standing closest to the cameras. Damien shook his head. "Why did you never tell me?" Claire turned toward him with remarkable gentleness. "Because every time you succeeded, I saw how proud you were becoming. I wanted that confidence to belong to you. I never imagined it would slowly convince you that you no longer needed me." Damien looked down at the wedding ring still resting inside his pocket. "I cannot change what I did." "No," Claire answered quietly. "Neither of us can." He removed the ring and placed it carefully on the bench between them. "I am not asking for another chance. I only wanted you to know that I finally understand." Claire studied the ring for a long moment before closing his hand around it instead of taking it back. "Keep it," she said. "Not because I want to remember our ending, but because I hope you never forget our beginning." A breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers through the conservatory as silence settled comfortably between them. For the first time since their marriage ended, neither wealth nor regret dominated the conversation. Only honesty remained. As Claire slowly stood to leave, Eleanor approached with a discreet smile and whispered that their aircraft was ready for departure. Claire nodded before looking at Damien one final time. "Take care of yourself," she said sincerely. Then she walked away with calm, measured steps, leaving Damien standing alone beneath the glass ceiling, finally realizing that forgiveness could be offered freely even when the life they once shared could never be rebuilt. 6 months later, the first snow of winter settled quietly across Manhattan, softening the sharp edges of a city that never truly stopped moving. Carter Technologies still existed, but it had become a humbler company, smaller than before, built now on careful decisions instead of relentless ambition. Damien no longer chased magazine covers or exclusive galas. He spent more mornings walking through his offices, speaking directly with employees whose names he had once struggled to remember. Success had become quieter. So had he. One December morning, his assistant placed a simple envelope on his desk. There was no corporate seal, no legal notice, only a familiar handwriting that immediately brought back countless memories. Inside was a single birth announcement. A healthy baby girl had entered the world surrounded by love, excellent doctors, and a peaceful family. There was no dramatic message, no request, no accusation, Only one short handwritten sentence beneath the photograph. She deserves a future built on kindness. Damien studied the picture for several silent minutes. The little girl had Claire's gentle eyes. Without realizing it, he smiled. Not because he believed the past could somehow return, but because the child represented everything that still deserved protecting. He carefully placed the photograph inside the same drawer that now held the wedding ring and Claire's letter, 3 quiet reminders that the greatest lessons in life rarely arrive during moments of victory. Across the country, Claire stood before the completed Kensington Children's Medical Research Center as families gathered for its opening ceremony. The building overlooked a peaceful park instead of a financial district. Doctors, nurses, teachers, researchers, and community volunteers filled the audience. Television crews attended, yet the event focused entirely on the children who would receive care regardless of their family's income. When Claire stepped onto the stage, she did not speak about wealth or business rankings. She thanked the medical teams, the construction workers, the donors who preferred anonymity, and every parent who had refused to give up hope during difficult moments. Her daughter rested peacefully in Eleanor's arms nearby, surrounded by people who cared more about her happiness than her inheritance. Daniel Mercer watched from the audience while quietly closing the weathered notebook that had once belonged to his grandfather. The story was finally complete, not because every mystery had been solved, but because the truth had found the people who needed it most. After the ceremony, Daniel approached Claire with a warm smile. "My grandfather always believed history remembered the loudest voices first," he said. He also believed time eventually discovered the quiet ones. Claire looked toward the children laughing near the garden outside the center. The quiet ones usually spend their lives building something instead of talking about it. Daniel nodded before placing the notebook into the foundation archive, where future generations would preserve it. Months turned into years. Claire continued expanding hospitals, scholarship programs, and research partnerships across the world. Her name gradually became associated with compassion as much as extraordinary leadership. She never corrected journalists who called her one of the most influential women alive, yet she still preferred simple mornings, homemade breakfasts, and evenings reading stories to her daughter. The life she truly wanted had never been measured by headlines. One autumn afternoon, nearly 4 years after the divorce, Damien attended a charity conference as an ordinary guest. The keynote speaker unexpectedly announced a record-breaking collaboration between several international foundations dedicated to children's health. The audience rose in applause as Claire briefly appeared on stage with her daughter, holding her hand. Their eyes met across the auditorium for only a moment. Claire offered the same gentle smile she had always carried. Damien returned it with genuine gratitude before quietly joining everyone else in applauding her work. Neither crossed the room. Neither needed to. Some relationships are restored through reunion. Others are redeemed through understanding. As the applause slowly faded, Damien realized he no longer measured his greatest loss by money, status, or opportunity. He measured it by the extraordinary woman who had once believed in him before the world ever did. And perhaps that was justice in its purest form. Some fortunes can be rebuilt. Some companies can recover. But the rarest treasure any person will ever hold is the quiet heart that chooses to love without asking for recognition. Lose that once, and no amount of wealth will ever make you truly rich again.